change management. So change management, as you can imagine, is really, really important and kind of an integral part, not just of a potential career for you, but also of business operations. So especially given what's happened over the last year, the ability to pivot and adaptability across all organizations has proven essential in order for people to continue to operate effectively. And it's something that's really important for businesses and organizations to incorporate as a daily part of their operations, and certainly when they're looking forward for scaling and growth. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lindsay, and I work with the City of Vaughan's Economic and Cultural Development Department. So I do just want to give a little bit of a background about what we do. So we are just, I would consider us an asset within, the greater business ecosystem. And we do have a number of services that we offer to, entrepreneurs, startups, and businesses. So we have two kind of main buckets that we hit. So one of them is business development. So we do look to assist businesses that are looking to achieve growth and expansion goals. So that can be looking at focusing on employment and investment outcomes to help businesses be a part of Vaughan and York region economies. And that's where, certainly young professionals like yourself come into play who are considering careers in change management, that it's an in-demand career, and it is needed across all types of businesses. The other thing that we do is small business and entrepreneurship support. So we help budding entrepreneurs, small, medium enterprises, and inventors grow and thrive in a global marketplace. So through our services, which are business consultation, site selection, and strategic connections, we also provide entrepreneurship programs. So I do want to give a quick plug for Summer Company for those of you who are students and aren't aware. The provincial government does provide funding for youth to start their businesses. So as long as they're full-time students between the ages of 15 and 29, if you've got a business idea, now is the time to apply and get up to $3,000 to start or grow to start your business over the summer. I'll put a link in the chat just for everybody to have an idea about where to go to get more information on that. But furthermore, what we do is we also kind of fit from a larger perspective into government and economic development landscapes. So what we really do is act as connectors and matchmakers. But if you'd like to learn more about services that we offer, you've got a business idea, you want to learn more, we do have a website. I'll also put it in the chat, vaughanbusiness.ca. But we're really excited. Change management is something that's really important. I think you're going to get a lot out of the session today. You've got 4 amazing panelists. So without further ado, I do want to introduce our moderator for today. So I'd like to welcome Chris Carter. So Chris is the Executive Director at the Office of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Schulich School of Business. So I'm going to flip it over to Chris and then we'll get started.
Hey everyone, welcome today. Excited to be here with you for many reasons. First of all, wow, it's exciting to see such a great turnout. People are still moving their way into the room, and we're going to have a great group with lots of great questions and ideas. The panel group today has everything that you could ask for in terms of looking at this topic. We have everyone from big enterprise through to different levels of government, consulting, and people starting new businesses and entrepreneurial journeys to discuss as well too. So whatever angle you're coming at it from, this is an interesting opportunity. Myself, I'm excited when I got invited to do this because as an entrepreneur, long before I came to York to help work at Schulich, I was an entrepreneur for many, many years, 20 plus years, building different technology companies. And I've often seen the impact of new technology, disruptive ideas, and what happens inside organizations. And the ones that succeed and adopt technology and grow and thrive are the ones who really get change management, have the right people on board. And the ones that struggle and have like acquisitions or new adoptions implode inside the organizations are those that can't get it. So the work that you do, the work these people do that are on our panel here today is immensely important. So I'm excited for that conversation. So thanks to Serena and thanks to Lindsay as well for setting this up and having the intro. We're going to go in the beginning and we're going to have the moderated panel. And we'll do that to about 3:15. And then at 3:15, we're going to go into our awesome audience here and have additional questions and things that are particularly on your mind for your career and your futures. And we'll handle that in 2 ways. One will be you can shout out in the chat and I'll give everyone a reminder when the time comes and we'll try and pull it out of the chat. or two, you can use the hand raise function, although that doesn't always work for everybody. So some of you will raise hands, some of you in chat will get to all of you and bring you into the conversation. When I was looking at the panel group today, the four, and doing my, reminder research after I'd looked at them a while back, but looking at them again, I was just, really impressed with the group of people that's been put here together. And I'm going to give what I would call like just a quick shout out. I'm not going to do their full bio. You're going to get some of that introduction about their journey through the questions that we ask. But first of all, we have Tosin Akinwakomi from RBC, where he is the Director of Multi-Lever Transformation Initiatives. And he is a York alumni as well, too, has worked as a York course director as well. And in 2018, won CPA Ontario's Emerging Leaders Award. So we're excited to have him with us today. Next up, we have Roderick Brereton, who's the owner of Urban Res Solutions. 13 years in business. Let me tell you, as an entrepreneur, and Roderick's going to agree with this, not easy to stay 13 years in business and to grow and keep building and thriving. Most companies don't make it out of the first, 18 to 24 months. So hats off to that. And an organization that specializes in social change, and looking through his profile and seeing what he's working on, what he's up to, key categories as the world is dealing with many social change issues and opportunities right now. So we're excited to have that conversation as well too. And then we have Shannon, Kaura Ramjoo, and she has the only title I've heard yet that makes me envious of her title, because I thought mine was cool. But she is the Senior Manager, Enterprise Project and Change Management, Strategic Innovation at the City of Vaughan Office of Transformation and Strategy. And that's pretty cool. And she has worked at many different levels of government. And she as well is a York alumna. So we're happy to have her here with us today. And then last but not least, we have Eamonn Juji, and she is the managing partner of ShiftRight Consulting. Now, it's a human capital consulting firm, just started in 2017. And when I was reading about her online, she was talking about the things that she's most proud of right now in her career. And just the entrepreneurial journey is something that she's passionate about, and was one of only 7 women to be selected in the Ella Altitude program recently. And she's been on that exciting journey. So what a group we have here today. Thank you all for joining us and spending your time with the students. It's really important that these lessons that you have and observations as you've gone through your careers and your journeys, as you know, are passed on to the students so that they can accelerate and move faster to find the opportunities that they're looking for. Also our recent graduates. So I gave you the quick hit and the quick intro. We'd like to, cover a lot of ground in the first hour or so. And so I'm going to ask you if you could try your best to keep your answers to that 2-minute, if you're really on a roll, the 3-minute mark, but kind of that 2 to 3 minute, so we can keep passing things along to the group. So first off, I'm going to begin first off. Let me see where I'm going to do first with Tosin, and then we'll continue along the path. Just a few minutes to each of you to introduce yourself in terms of your current role within your organization. And you don't have to go into the back history because we're going to get to that, but just currently where you're at and what you're up to. So Tosin, we'll start with you.
Okay. Chris, I think you said Tosin, right?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Thank you for the invite. Always a good, great experience coming back to York, even though this is virtual and not physical. So in my current role, I am Director, Multi-Lever and Transformation Initiatives. And what that means is as we look at transforming the bank to be competitive, to stay competitive, in the world of fintechs and Amazon and Apple all becoming financial services companies, there are a lot of products and processes within the bank that are still classic in the way they're set up, right? So going back legacy. And so my job and my team's job is to try and transform as many of that to be next generation, right? Think about getting your mortgage. How do we make mortgages as seamless as you opening your Facebook account, right? Or how do we, and both the account opening and also the fulfillment, giving you your money, right? So there are a lot of teams, hundreds of people that work on that end to end. And so my job is to try and figure out how best to position us for the future in things like that.
Awesome. Well done and right on time. Great example for everybody else. Okay, Roderick, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Again, it's a pleasure to be here at York with you. And I've been actually had the honor to have been on this panel, or not specifically this panel, but other panels with Serena in the past. So again, it's always a pleasure to be here with you. So I am the CEO of Urban Rest Solutions, and we deem ourselves as a social transformational agency, social transformational change agency in that aspect of how we work with different governments, different communities, different organizations, and that we recognize that change is inevitable and it's going to happen like it or not. So we work with, again, these different entities to help empowered change. And for instance, when something comes down from the top, whether it be an organizational change or a systems change, there's often reluctance to change. And what one of our main functions is to help people, whether that be employees or management, to help walk through that process of change, to make change, again, a piece where it's not, I've got to deal with this and, I don't want to deal with it, but how are you going to be able to buy in to that change? So giving opportunities for people to weigh in to that change and what that's going to look like, and then ultimately buy into that change is a big aspect of what we do. And that could look like, again, from a corporate entity to a community function that's happening. So it's vast, it's real, and it's forever changing. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Thank you, Roderick. Next, we're going to go to Shannon.
Hi, everyone. So I as mentioned, I worked within the city of Vaughan. So I essentially oversee project management, change management, as well as our strategic innovation area. And so there's a couple of things that we do. So first and foremost, we lead the city's transformational agenda. So all of those really tough projects that are, impact the entire city, we are responsible for leading most of them. I also build organizational capacity around project change management, as well as lean, which is the new thing in government and has really taken off since the pandemic, as well as managing the entire the citywide business case process. So connecting good business planning to business cases, eventually to budget. So that's kind of a quick overview of my role at the city.
Awesome. Thank you. Aymen.
Good afternoon, and I echo everyone's sentiments. I'm really excited to be part of the panel and to talk about change management, which is, a passion project for me. So in terms of my background, I am the CEO and managing partner at ShiftRight Consulting. We are a human capital consulting firm with a passion for change. ShiftRight was really born out of my desire to help really great organizations make changes that actually stick. So we call ourselves the change experts. We come in and we help organizations that are going through oftentimes very complicated change, and we try to distill it down in a simplified way to really helping businesses achieve their end objectives. We offer three main service lines: change transformation, organizational redesign, and leadership development. 80% of the type of work that we tend to do is driven through system and digital-based innovation projects, and that tends to span across all three of our service line offerings.
Perfect. You guys are awesome. You're like just right on track in terms of giving the answers nice and concise. I love it. And we're going to go to the next kind of like part of your individual stories. And we'll, just to prepare you, we're going to go in the same order that we just went through. So the next piece, often at this point, as you can imagine, many of the students, it's almost April, and that means like there's graduation coming up or summer opportunities that they're looking for. So everyone's minds are like partially on their final exams and these things, but they're also on what they're going to do for their job. So I'd like you to like rewind yourself back to that point in time when you were starting out and, earlier in your career story. What was that first position, that first opportunity you had with change management? How did you get interested in it? And maybe it wasn't exactly when you were graduating. You could have had another transformation in your career at some point, but dial us back to the start of your transformation at that point in change management, and tell us a little bit about that story. And we'll start again with Tosin.
Yeah, it's a good question. So if I was to go wind all the way back to the start of my career, I definitely didn't start in change management. I was a BCom student, started in finance and accounting. It was 7 years into my career that and if you think about sort of where I'd come from, spent some time in the government and was responsible for grants and contributions, where the government would fund an organization. And my job was to go out and audit those organizations to see how they were doing with the funding that they got, right? And so one of the biggest issues we always had was an organization, because of government funding, goes from having, $500,000 in revenue this year and then 5 million next year, right? And they would have the capacity to be able to operate at that level was always an issue, right? And we used to, sort of wonder, what's the missing piece here, right? Why can't you go from $500,000 as an entrepreneur to 5 million in the space of a month, for example, right? And what the issues are happening. That was my introduction to change management, but I definitely wasn't, I wouldn't say I was familiar with what it meant and the impact it could have in business. It wasn't until I moved into financial services and I started to see that on a more day-to-day basis that I started to pick up the interest in it. And so I made the transition from being an auditor to being a strategist and going into transformation and change and transformation. And once I saw that, my eyes opened. I realized all the different factors in success of all the different types of work I've done in the past, where change management, if done well, would have been at the root of success. And all the scenarios where it hadn't gone well and we'd lost a lot of money or lost a lot of time and lost a lot of adoption, and how that was the missing piece for it. So everything clicked for me in that first few months. And so I made that transition then. I had to go and get an MBA to be able to make the career change, but the mindset change was definitely happened on a project for me. And I met a change management specialist that started to talk to me about all these things that were more common sense, but never really was not in my awareness up until that moment. So for me, it was almost an aha moment coupled with formal education afterwards.
I think that's a really cool point, that like you always have to keep your eyes open for what those career opportunities or paths are coming by as you realize you're good at something, or in the middle of a project and you see someone working on it, you think I could do that too. And also that commitment to continuing education that you mentioned as well. Roderick, you have a really interesting profile in terms of there's this moment where it seems like you really changed, but tell us a little bit about that.
All right, so I could say I entered the change management sector when I was working with the City of Toronto. So basically, there was a systems change that was coming down the pipeline, and it was within the social services sector. And it was very controversial because social services has over 1,400 employees, frontline staff who are using this new program. And the program, it was like if you were used to using, oranges for the last 10 years and automatically, overnight you switch to apples, it just caused a major contention. And it was to the point where it was becoming very toxic within the employees, and the change, because no one was able to have a say in how that change came down. It was just turmoil. So there was a group of us that were asked to help in terms of just helping manage some of the anxieties, some of the concerns that employees were having with having to use this new system. And obviously when something gets put down or passed down on you, there's no choice. So, obviously being a sociology student and having worked within that aspect of helping people through conflicts, it was a team effort in the sense of how could we address this in terms of having people being heard. How could we increase the level of understanding and actually the acknowledgement of the resiliency that people had, obviously within each and every one of everybody, but not necessarily tapped into. So it was a task that we had to look through, I guess, a 40,000-foot lens and see how we could help people in that sense adapt to change and embrace change and be a part of the change, not just be impacted by change. So from that, when we were able to do that, and then again, because it was divisional, once we started putting into work the processes and then how people can transition to own this change as opposed to be owned by the change, it changed the dynamic drastically. And from there, we looked at, in terms of moving on for major organizational changes, how people, again, could be a part of the change moving forward. So as opposed to reacting to it, being a part of that proactive change and having the way in to buy in before that change came down the pipeline, right? So that being said, I recognized how wonderfully that worked. And then in the sense of some of the community initiatives that we were also doing, look to see how we could incorporate that actual social transformational change so that people could own it. And I think that's one of the major parts, and I'm almost done here right now because I know my 2 minutes is coming up, that when we recognize when you're a part of the change, when you're owning the change, it's a huge, huge difference as opposed to being, told or, disempowered in that change process.
Okay, Shannon, where did it happen for you? Was it a gradual process, or was it early on that you were?
So for myself, it was actually several years back when I had first started at the Region of Peel. I was involved in a project. It was a massive organization-wide transformation to really start to connect strategy to budget and really make decisions so that there was greater strategic alignment. And change management, the project management was definitely important, but change management was key. And I ended up taking a course, a 3-day program with ProSci on their whole ADCAR model. And it was an eye opener for me. I learned so much, because, project management, change management, they go together. You need a good plan, but you also need to think about the change management aspects. And project management is more the planning component, change is about the people. And I really started, I learned more about that. And then from there went to health services and then created a new change office within that, supporting a department of 2,500 people with change management. And then came to the city of Vaughan and continued that journey. So it is fundamental to success, especially with COVID and the need to now change. It's become really pivotal.
Thank you, and hold that COVID thought, because we're going to come back to that in a question coming down the pipe here. So, Aymen, I'm really fascinated to hear your answer here, because you've chosen what to me is the glorious path of entrepreneurship, maybe a little less traditional, but tell us about, as a student, where you were finding that opportunity and where the spark came from.
For sure. I think if I just sort of back it up a little bit, I think whenever you're considering, a career, I think what's really important is to start to think through what things are you really interested in? What piques your curiosity? What is it that drives you? What makes you excited? And I would say I was fortunate in the sense that I was relatively early in my career where I knew that I wanted a type of career that was going to be providing me with challenges intellectually on a constant basis. I really enjoyed project-based work. And so when I was in university, I had the opportunity to source a client that I could work with. So I actually decided to work with Service Ontario. And at the time, they were going through a massive amount of transformation. So they were attempting to increase the uptake of their digital platforms. So they wanted to sort of start to move away from the traditional kiosks that you see in malls and stuff like that, and move towards an online presence. And so I had a great opportunity to work with the IT side of the organization, as well as the strategic business side of the organization. And then because it was in public service, there was a huge component of really hearing the voice of the constituent. So it kind of gave me this really interesting lens, and going through a lot of the ups and downs of being on that project, I guess as a co-op for the duration of time, gave me the length of time to really explore the different things. So as a public service organization, when you're moving to a digital-based strategy, you have to be very cognizant that you're not sort of ostracizing any constituent groups. So we did a lot of focus groups to figure out demographically what makes sense if we move towards an online platform. And through the course of just the strategy, the way that we were engaging with different stakeholder groups, the different pieces from an IT perspective, from a strategic perspective, from a comms perspective, it all kind of lended itself to the type of work that I was really interested in, because I feel like with change, what it allows you to do is oftentimes you get the opportunity to be on some phenomenal projects relatively early in your career, but you get also the opportunity to deep dive into different areas of the organization and get a sense of how do they work, what makes them tick, what is going to work for this side of the organization. So for me, that is kind of how I started, like I said, relatively early. And then I spent most of my career in consulting, in professional services consulting firms. I started at a boutique consulting firm. I moved to a Big Four, Deloitte, and I kind of came full circle and decided to start my own back in 2017. And I think, just to answer your question, Chris, it was sort of an evolution because I had been in a smaller consulting firm and moved into the Big Four, and then I went independent. I said, let me try to do this and see what comes of it. So I took that jump back in 2017, and I'm happy to share more of the insights as we continue the conversation.
Yeah. Perfect. We'll come back to those for sure. I think it's interesting if everyone might be observing, like, some of the common threads about the people in the group is that it's not only that they're, adept at managing change. There are people that are adept at managing their own change and finding like paths and interesting ways to, keep evolving and changing as they go throughout their career. I'd like to ask each of you for a word on what it is as people are thinking about this as a career path. What is it that you enjoy most about the job? Like, what is it that gives you joy? What is it that like has you jump out of bed in the morning? Is it that you love to solve puzzles? Is it what happens when people are like, suddenly get it and they're all on the same page? If you can either tell a story or give a reflection on that. I'd love to hear where your joy comes from. And we'll start again with those.
Yeah, I think once you get the mindset, again, I always think about mindset. Once you get the mindset and it clicks with you, you start to then notice it in different environments. So whether I'm working on a transformation project, or I'm at church and the minister's complaining that young people don't want to come to church, or I'm talking to an entrepreneur and they say, I worked on this, but I have no idea how I'm going to get people to use it. And all these, connecting points about all the different connections between those type of problems, excites me, because it's not always straight true. It's not always known. And it's almost a process of discovery every single time, right? You can't make a lot of assumptions and you just come in and discover. So for me, that's what is that has me, passionate about it, just the process of discovery. And then I would say when it finally then clicks, right? And you see the outcome, right? It's so tangible when, we produce an AI algorithm that you want people to use to solve business problems, but they don't use it. There's 30% uptick in the first, 6 months. And then you come into the picture and you think through, help discover what the challenges are and provide a few recommendations and help to see that through. And you start to slowly see a gradual uptick in people actually wanting to use it. And it's the same product, it's the same team. And so for me, those delayed gratification, yes, but definitely worthwhile. Really gets me going. But I have to say that if you're in change management, you also have to be the type of person that doesn't necessarily need to take the credit for it, because a lot of times if it does click, it's because those folks figure it out, right? It has nothing to do with you, quote unquote, with you. And it's because, you know, the actual business owner or the technology owner did something magical. But you and them know that the magic was between, you know, what can we do about addressing people's behaviors and things of that nature, right? And what can we do to make it easy, right? But if it works, you're not necessarily going to get the kudos from the crowd. But if it doesn't work, people are very quick to say, oh, we missed on change management, right? And so you also have to have that ability to take that on an ongoing basis if you want to work in change management. As much as, and so being able to find satisfaction in your own work is very necessary a lot of times. So I hope I didn't go around into too much of a circle. I thought that's a good context to understand whenever you talk about change management.
Oh, that's really cool. And that's a really interesting observation for people in terms of the, you know, the approach that you have to take. I almost had this image of you in my mind, like solving a problem in a town and then quietly like walking out on the other end of town off to the next one that might need help. Okay, Roderick, how would you reflect on that? Where you find your joy?
I find my joy actually mostly in the community level. So like, for instance, when we work with people who have either been reluctant to change and working within the community in an aspect of helping, for instance, those people who are unemployed or not gainfully doing things with their time or being productive, right? And often these are communities that are socioeconomically challenged. So when we're working with young people, especially when they embrace change, and you know, we've kind of broken it down in a sense of recognizing the process of change. So a habit repeated over and over becomes a behavior, and that behavior repeated over and over becomes culture. So often we've got to change the culture of, you know, or help change that culture, empower people to change the culture to reflect ultimately what they're trying to achieve in terms of their objectives. So sometimes obviously that deprogramming of, you know, things that have been done in the past and haven't worked well, and then just introducing and imparting new concepts that people again can embrace, own, and go about their own changes, and in a sense of seeing what's worked, you know, those recipes for progress and success, imparting those and seeing that gradual change. And as we know, you know, change doesn't happen overnight. It can happen overnight, but in terms of when you're empowered in terms of that change that you're walking into, you know, it's usually a gradual process. And seeing people, you know, who have either, for instance, you know, been chronically unemployed, and then, you know, they've got the preparedness in terms of that change that they've invested into to you know, to get to some aspect of training, and then either be post-secondary education, and then, you know, at the outcome of seeing themselves in, you know, university or you know, in a career. You know, that's the change that I most love to see, in the sense that people have owned it, walked through it, and can see their trajectory, not just from the beginning, but when they've gone from, you know, from point A to point Z, you know, they can see that change has taken place, and then, you know, recognize it and acknowledge it, and obviously own it. So that's, you know, being a part of that it's so enjoyable for myself.
That's cool. Shannon, how would you reflect on that?
So for myself, the most exciting part is coming from an organization. So I've been with the City of Vaughan for about a year and a half now, a little over that. And I came from an organization that started their change journey, went through the pains of getting people to understand what this discipline was all about, seeing it be very successful, and having it then, you know, moving to a health service and healthcare environment, and then, you know, establishing it there. You know, just coming to the city and being able to do the same. There's a lot of transformation underway, and by applying that change management discipline, we're just going to be more and more successful at executing, and that's always sort of the hardest part. And then just really integrating it. Like I've got lean under myself as well as project management, and it's all they're all changes that happen, whether it's small processes or big transformations. And you can apply change management principles. It's almost like a sneaky thing, but it's a really good skill to have. And it just becomes part of you, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, it becomes part of you. And so that's really exciting.
Thank you. Aymen, I'm going to come to you for like a double answer, right? So like one is like, I want to know what brings you joy from like the role and change, but also from making the decision to be an entrepreneur as opposed to working for someone else in this category.
Okay, yeah, a great question. I'll start with the what is it that I love about change management? And I think one of the things I wanted to say is the way that I see my role in change management is to be the impartial conduit. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when you're on a project, you're dealing with a lot of different stakeholders that all have competing objectives. And so my joy comes from trying to understand where each of them is coming from and then try to translate it in a way that gets them closer to where they want to be. And one story that I would share that I think would help to resonate in terms of the point is I was on an initiative, without disclosing the client, where they were going through a massive acquisition, and the acquiring company was acquiring a company whose culture was drastically different than theirs. So the company that was doing the acquisition had the culture of being very quick to action, less thoughtful in the decision making, and they'd kind of just pull the trigger and go. Conversely, the company they were acquiring was much more passive when it came to quick decision making. They were much more thoughtful. They took their time. Now, imagine these two very opposing cultures coming together. In addition to that, what was happening is the technology of the company that they were acquiring was actually at a higher grade than the company that was acquiring them. So one of the decisions the CIO made was that the company that was getting acquired would have to go back to an older version of the platform that they were on. So imagine being on a change initiative where you can't sell the benefit of, hey, this is going to be so much better. You're actually selling the benefit of, hey, you're going back to what you had a couple of years ago, and then we'll eventually get you back to where you are. So that was a really cool project to be on. It was interesting because, again, it came from the perspective of this is a challenge. You have to be transparent in the fact that the benefits are not always going to be clear cut. It's not always going to be this is going to be faster, quicker, better. Sometimes it's going to be clunky and inefficient. And so I think what I loved about the role was trying to get the cohort of people that were going back to a version that they weren't happy with to buy into it. And how do you do that well? So part of that is really coming up with a strategy to think through, like, if I were in that position, what would I want to know? And so I think oftentimes it's how do you connect with the people? Because organizations don't change, it's people that change. And the only way you can do that is to really connect on transparently sort of identifying that, hey, this is not going to be great, but we're going to get there. And this is why we need your insights, because you've been through it and this side of the organization has it. So I think kind of listening to the different perspectives, but coming up with a balanced, rational approach to how you can get there has been the part that I've really enjoyed. And then to answer your second question about entrepreneurism, that is a whole different ballgame, I would say. I think when I was a consultant, you still have that impartiality of, you know, I'm servicing this client, but you're still an employee within that firm. I think when you kind of take the jump and decide to go and, you know, start your own business, it's all on you. And it's great because what ends up happening is you are the master of that ship. You determine the strategy, you determine where you're going, you determine, you know, what does that look like? On the other hand, it's all up to you. So how fast you move, how effectively you move is all up to you as well. And I think for me, what really helped is I was gradually moving to something like entrepreneurship. So I started at a startup consulting firm. I moved to a larger consulting firm. I went independent, which I would say was sort of the in-between. And that really gave me a sense of, if I were to do this where I had multiple clients, would that be something that was interesting to me. How could I do that effectively? How could I scale what I was doing at one client to be scalable to larger clients? And so through the course of really testing and thinking and trying different things is really where I landed on, yeah, I think I can do this, and I'm going to take the plunge and do it.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing on both of those. Next, we're going to move on to, why it's important for organizations to have people like yourselves and have groups like yourselves to be able to work on this. But I'd like you to take a look at it through the lens of the last less than 12 months, remote work, reorganization, mass adoption of new technology, reworking of business models, social change and transformation happening inside and outside organizations, inside customer bases, government in transformation. Wow. If ever any a time was that people like yourselves were needed, it was this past year. So if we could have like a word just on like what it's meant in terms of the role and the work in this period of mass transformation, maybe as dramatic as we've seen in quite some time. Tosin, we'll start with you. We need to jump you off mute there.
Sorry, thanks. If 2020 was a change management course, probably be the toughest course on, human change, societal change, all the things that you listed. It was definitely a tough year. It was the year where, I think for myself, before I could even help with anybody's change, I had to try to work through change myself, within myself, right? Like and I think that's one of the first principles in change management, is that as a person leading change, so not necessarily maybe the change specialist, but the person that wants to introduce change, you have to come to terms with the change yourself and think about the positives and the negatives and the ups and the downs, and come to terms with that and see that you are for all of the above, right? And so for me, change 2020 was that. It was come to terms with all the different things that were happening. And then once I felt like I was in a decent place, to then start to think about how I could help others around me. So in the organization that I work in, what does that mean? How do you help people who are at home and who are having to deal with children and work and this? What does that mean for us as an organization? What does it mean for, in 2020 for Black employees in an organization who were traumatized by stuff that was going on outside the organization, but it's affecting their work within the organization? How do you sort of come together to develop a strategy to figure out what that means, right? If you are an organization that was, fully in the office before, and now all of a sudden, all your work had to be done remotely, what does that mean in terms of the way you make decisions, the way your technology operates, the way your employees, the connective tissue with employees and culture? What does that mean for all of the above, right? So 2020 was just a crash course in all of the above, right? It was a massive year, but for me, it was an exciting year. It was a year of really getting to the root of what change management is, which is you're helping people and organizations move from A to B, right? And sometimes B is a desirable point. Sometimes B is a point where you've been forced to, and you don't have a lot of choice, right? And so how do you help to position the change in that way to help people make that transition, regardless of what's influenced in the transition? So for me, that was one of the biggest lessons learned. I think Aymen spoke to it just now, that the destination is not always desirable, right? The destination is not always where people want to go, and if people don't necessarily always make the choice to want to go there. But if you're forced to, like COVID did for all of us, what does that mean in the way you make the transition? And these were topics that we explored, and it was a fascinating year of trial and error, I would have to say. And it was a fascinating year in learning from other people's other bright spots, right? So Hong Kong and Asia were ahead of us by a few months. I'd never gone into that point where, okay, let's see what's happening there and see what we can learn from what's happening in Hong Kong and the Pacific area, to see what that means for us here and what could we implement into our strategy. So I would say it was a good year of just thinking about your change strategy from a number of perspectives.
All the students that came out today made a good decision. This is some awesome stuff. Okay, Roderick.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has been obviously unprecedented in terms of the global change that it has brought about. Inevitably, everybody had to change to some degree. And why I think it's important that organizations have some sense of change management within their strategy is that, we have to be able to pivot. The unknown is, again, inevitable, and things are going to change like it or not. And I found that the organizations, whether it be government or corporations or whatnot, that were willing to change, were that open book, so that it wasn't just that, as we call it, that closed book where you couldn't write anything else, you couldn't write another paragraph in that. When organizations were open to change, they seem to have been able to navigate, these uncharted waters a lot better. And if you think about, for instance, how much money for organizations when it comes down to technology, when technology is imparted and it's a new part of the process for any organization, millions of dollars are often spent on new technology. But when it comes down to helping their employees change and understand it and learn it, and you have the patience to get just basically an understanding, a good grasp of it, not half as much is put into that, right? So I think organizations now with the pandemic have seen how they have to invest in their human capital, also in terms of being able to shift in this paradigm. And often now the organizations, again, that I've seen and I've been able to work with the government, and as Tosin just mentioned, for instance, within the racial unrest that we saw in 2020, government was scrambling, and a lot of organizations were scrambling just to find out, what to do. How do we need to change? Do we need to change our human rights, or sorry, our policy when it comes to HR? Do we need to put into place, policies for when it comes down to people having issues and whatnot? So, there was so much change that was happening, but, I think the organizations, again, that were open to change and were able to navigate and not blindly, but strategically, will continue to do better, as opposed to the ones who may have just been stuck in the old way and just are reluctant to change and have to change just based on whether that be policy or procedure that's coming down from somewhere else. So it's been a very interesting time for myself and our organization. It's been the busiest time ever that I've ever experienced, and then in terms of this ongoing process of change, and it's also exciting in the sense that sometimes in the foggiest place, you'll see that bright light, and how change, when adopting change and embracing change, can move organizations, and things will never be the same. But I think in terms of being open to change, we're all able to see where we can go to that next part of humanity and society in general.
Thank you. Shannon, universities and governments, a little bit alike, places of innovation, also places where there's things that never quite get over the hump in terms of changing, but we've gone fast now over the last year. How did you experience it in the lens of the government?
Yeah, so I'll say by starting off by saying that the City of Vaughan is a very agile organization and very transformative. It is building, for anyone that's sort of been there, it's building like rapidly from the outside, and it's caused us to really change from the inside too. So as soon as the pandemic hit, within a few weeks, one of the things we had done through my office is established a new team to look at after action reporting and lessons learned. And we started to take the pulse of the organization, going out, speaking to leaders, speaking to staff, to understand how they were feeling, and to design programs as the pandemic went on, because schools were closed. We knew we were in this for the long haul. And so earlier on, it was all about technology, getting used to working from home, having the right tools, supporting kids. And then later on, it was more about, okay, I need a little bit more office equipment to support a longer term work from home, or I need whatever. And then in the fall, it was about mental health, and so which led us to kind of expedite our wellness strategy. I think, we've done really well. The other thing we did was we actually started to document all the process innovations, whether it was going online, digital, whatever it was, started to document all those innovations and presented it to our council, because that's who we report to, our mayor and council. We also took their pulse and how they were feeling, and created a ready, resilient, and resourceful committee of council to oversee COVID. So we've done pretty well, and it is going to change service delivery, because we've asked those questions around, is this going to stick post-COVID? Are we going to do something hybrid, or are we going to potentially totally be in this new area of service delivery? So I think we've just done a really good job, and just experience with other organizations. I'm very, very impressed with how quickly the leaders moved at the city, and it could be because we're much flatter as an organization too.
Thank you. Aymen, what are your thoughts, 2020?
Yeah, so I think for me, what 2020 demonstrated is that it elevated the importance of change, but I would say it elevated it because I think change is starting to be seen as not something that is done by this one area of the organization, but that change as a skill set needs to be embedded in all employees, whether you're a leader or you are, a manager or whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, what COVID demonstrated is the capacity of a single person to pivot in response to what was happening. So I think what I've enjoyed seeing is the mindset shift of change management being performed by the HR side of the organization, or the specialized office here, to the understanding that change as a skill set is something that needs to be embodied across the organization. And the other piece is that I think what it has also demonstrated is the importance of being agile. And I think the formation of product-based teams and moving to an agile way of working is very much in line with the need for change being a skill set that is across all parts of the organization, because you're iterating constantly, you're leveraging the user feedback to make improvements. So for me, what was great to see was just moving out of the box of change as a skill set that is only within this particular area of the organization.
Okay, so now we're going to transition into where 2020 has unlocked new opportunities, I'm sure, as well too. So as the students are looking for, areas of growth within change management roles, things that are like a constant area of opportunity, but new ones that might have emerged over the last year, let's talk about some of the things they should be thinking about in terms of where they can be looking for opportunity out there. Tosin, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, so there is definitely a lot more interest in change management, I have to say. So I expect that, these a lot of organizations like we are exploring are now looking at the future of work and what that means for them as an organization, and people that can help them think through that and help them practicalize what it means to work in an environment where you're both remote and sometimes in the office, or fully remote or fully in the office, or all of the above, right? So I think these concepts, I'll focus on the concepts that I think are really going to be pervasive over the next probably year or two, future of work. And I think the second is what I would say are transformation of the way we work, of the way our processes work, right? So if you think about traditional pillar type organizations like banking and telecom, there's a greater pressure for them to develop and and be able to cater to this new world that we find ourselves living in, right? There isn't, I don't think we can kid ourselves that we're somehow going to go back to how everything used to be. I think what COVID has done is accelerated the need for transformation. So in my organization, for example, while we may not hire for a lot of change management, individuals, there's a few roles, but you'll find a lot of transformation roles that are, if you look at the job description, that's really, really focused on change, right? And so people that have a skill set plus change are going to be well sought after, because you can go work in that area of your skill, but be the person that's the point for change management. So use myself as an example. Auditor by trade, started doing change management 7-8 years ago. And so when the organization said, we want to transform audit, it was like, okay, this person sort of has a skill set and it can help us lead the transformation, right? Or you are a HR specialist and you understand the human recruitment and onboarding and things of that nature, but you're also able to do change management. Those type of folks are well sought after now. And I read job descriptions all the time just to keep up to date on what's going on. And there's always an element of change management now that's become an underlying theme for, we don't have a project, we just want somebody who understands how to do this to join the team and help us on the day-to-day, right? Now, on big transformation, yes, there will always be a need to have, one or two people who are primarily focused on change management. And so you'll see more and more of those in, human capital roles, right? You'll see more and more of them in big technology changeover, right? You'll see more and more of them in AI and automation, where organizations are going forward to do AI and automation, and they need people to come in and help them translate that for their regular folk, quote unquote regular folk, right? So, to summarize, I think the things that have happened because of COVID and lockdown, they're here to stay, and now they're creating a push and a pressure on the way business is going to need to work. And as a result, more businesses, at least the forward-thinking ones, are investing in transformation now, knowing fully well they need to change in order to keep up, right? So that transformation agenda is top of mind. I can almost guarantee for all the banks, for all the telecoms, they are looking at what does this mean for the way we work in the future. And then second point was, for any skill set that you have, because I think, maybe some students are MBA or master's students and they had a previous career and are exploring something else, always think about the combination of your experiences, not necessarily just one thing, right? That's where you'll find the gold. And okay, I used to do this, but then I can come in and help lead change in that thing I used to do, right? So those are I think that are really, really top of mind, and the type of opportunities that folks will find out there.
Thank you. Roderick, what are your thoughts?
I think, people have to be at this point in time to be prepared to think outside of the box. Right now, there is no norm, quote unquote. And the pandemic, as we all have seen, has shifted our sense of what we knew as normal. And now, again, we're in these waters that anything could happen. And I think we've got to be prepared that anything can happen, and being empowered in our change and thinking outside of that box will, I think, help and introduce new industries and new opportunities that haven't existed in the past. So I think people have to be definitely innovative in how they're seeing change and how they're seeing industries. And for instance, some of the organizations or industries that have been slower to change, I think there's great opportunities there in the sense of being able to introduce new ways of doing things, new ways of attracting and keeping customers, for instance. And also, I think, technology, if you think about it, a year ago, we more than likely would not have been on, this platform that we're on right now, this virtual platform. And there's so many industries that have come out of, this pandemic, and looking at where change management and then these new industries that have been born out of this pandemic, looking to see how they could even continually change in the sense of, you know, the change that's inevitable in terms of what's next. Because, you know, yes, we are in, you know, lockdown, and, you know, there has been obviously a major shift in all of our lives, but, you know, it's nothing stays the same forever. So post-pandemic, what is the change that's going to be happening thereafter, right? There's going to be something that's going to be changing. If people are going to be coming back out, you know, is there going to be some sense of social anxiety? So, I was listening to a psychologist speaking recently, and they were talking about this social anxiety that they can almost predict because people haven't, you know, been at the office, people haven't, you know, been socializing. You know, what is that going to look like, right? So there's another major change, you know, I guess after, you know, the vaccine process is taking place and whatnot, that society inevitably is going to be facing. So I think there's always opportunity, and we just have to be thinking ahead. We've got to be using our ingenuity and our innovativeness to address and embrace, again, the change that is going to be coming along the way. And also using our transferable skills to apply those to the changes that we may, you know, be in tow of or having as our next part of our process, right? So what skills can we take that we've learned now, either be in pandemic or prior to pandemic, and apply them to the future? So I think we've just got to be open and look at opportunities not in the same way, but looking and knowing that there will be opportunities, and the world has never stopped and it will not. So I think we've got to just be optimistic, but also realistic, and again, looking for these opportunities that, you know, will exist and we can often, you know, create.
Thanks. Shannon, what are some areas of opportunity you think our students should be looking out for?
Sure. So I'll start by saying that within municipalities, like there's 444 municipalities in Ontario. So they've been impacted sort of the most in the sense that they're being forced to, you know, like at the city of Vaughan, we had to rethink our property tax rate, and suddenly went from 3% that we're charging each year, which gave us revenue, to zero. At the same time, we've had to close down services. So it was a bit of a double whammy where we're getting crunched. We have to transform. We have no choice. And it's not just talking about the city of Vaughan, but many municipalities, they have to transform. It's become, you know, I was talking to colleagues in the city of Toronto too, like it has become a necessity. So skills like, you know, change management, good project management, effective facilitation, like those are all opportunities. And like I highly encourage, like, you know, the learning around change management, you know, reading up on it. I know when I started, like since then, there's like a dozen different change management methodologies. Learn about them, learn about the effectiveness of them. And you will find that even when you look for roles, like change management is something you'll see in a lot of job descriptions now, from the most junior level to the most senior level. It's a skill set that's needed.
Okay, thank you. Aymen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, reflecting on your question, Chris, I was just thinking about the industries we service. And so we service financial sector, energy, oil and gas, as well as retail. And a common thread that I can continue to see being an area that will always be very popular is the move towards customer-centric data focus. And what I mean by that is if I look at our grocery retail customers, you know, they're thinking about how do we get smarter, better, more efficient, and customize the offerings we give our customers? How do we get so smart that we can anticipate what it is you want to put in your basket before you even click? If I look at financial services, what's been really interesting is they've come historically from an industry that's heavily regulated, much slower moving, and with the onset of the government providing, you know, massive amounts of funding, they've had to sort of figure out very quickly, how do we do this so that we get this money into these accounts in a matter of days, right? So that has required them to really shift their thinking around processes, efficiencies, decision making. But equally, what's been interesting to watch in the financial services sector is as compared to grocery retail, they're a little bit behind, but they are equally looking to how do they drive smart data from their customers. So a lot of what Tosin was mentioning about how do we make applying for a mortgage as easy as, logging onto your Facebook. I can see that same trend where we're moving towards smart customer-centric data that is driving the ability to develop products and services that are very centered to what the customer wants. So individuals that have the ability to provide a skill set that has an understanding of big data, of AI, of digitalization, and couple that with the change skill set, I think you are in a really great niche area where you can bring both to the table. And I think you'd stand out from the competition because that area is so specialized and you're bringing it with the change skill set. I think that is super helpful. And then the last industry I would touch on would be energy and oil and gas. And so within this sector, what I've noticed unsurprisingly is what the pandemic had exposed was, the reliance on the oil prices. And when the pandemic hit, we all saw, the battering oil and gas took. And so a lot of their strategies on renewable energy and how do we get there faster and, net zero carbon emissions, all of those kinds of things have elevated in terms of priority because kind of similar to they don't have an option. They need to pivot. They need to consider alternative ways of working. So if you're considering a job within the change field, if you're able to provide a focus on renewable energy or an industry insight in that particular field would also be something I think that would be definitely in demand moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and then in a few minutes, we're going to get ready to go to the audience with their questions. We're going to take a little bit of a moment to get your observations on what makes a candidate that stands out for you when you're hiring, in this area, and in general, you can have reflections on that. It's one of the most common questions that we get from the students around this time of year is like, how am I, what can I do to stand out and get through the 10, 20, 30, 40, 400 people who have all applied for that coveted job. So if you could each give us one of your reflections on that, that would be great. And we'll start with Tosin again.
Yeah. You can answer this question from two perspectives, right? One, are you a technical person? And two, are you not, right? So technical as in you come to the table with some deep expertise in, programming or finance, right? Like your CFA level with Excel sheets, right? Like there's one parallel, and there's the second, whereas are you a generalist, right? Are you somebody who's worked in different areas, but you wouldn't necessarily call yourself a specialist? With the technical folks, if we're looking for technical skill sets, the biggest thing we're looking for after we've all checked off your technical, your technical competency is your ability for storytelling, right? Helping other people come into the hut, if you will, right? Like you live in this world. How do you get everybody else to come into it and help them travel along with you, right? How do you get people to understand? That's always sort of top of mind, because the worst thing you can sort of do is especially if you're in the change or transformation environment, hire somebody that only knows how to do the technical thing, but then I have to hire somebody else to help them tell the story about the thing that they're doing, right? So think about, all right, if I've got this skill set, how do I round myself out with some basic understanding of human-centered design, some basic understanding of agile, some basic understanding of some behavioral principles about how humans work, which you can pick up in a course or a couple of books, right? Just understanding that when I'm designing something for other people, it needs to be easy, it needs to be attractive, I need to somehow build some sort of social environment around it, right? So you can learn these principles that then when you look at your work, makes it extremely easy for everybody else to come into the sandbox with you. For folks that are generalists, which I am myself, you also want to make sure that you're deep in some areas, right? Make sure that if you're hiring, you're coming to the table, you can think about like a T shape. Like you're not, whereas the technical person goes all the way down, they're like a single one, they go deep. You as a generalist need to be a couple of steps down in a few areas. So for me, you can say I'm a couple of steps down in audit, accounting, right? Right. So I understand that. And I've then been able to overlay transformation over it, right? So we would like to know, what do you have a deeper understanding of that could be really good for us? Because we can think about, okay, well, if we're working on a project, at least we know Tosin can help us figure out business case if we haven't gone into the point where we're talking about change strategy just yet, right? He can sort of weigh in on business case development and the things we need to be thinking of. But he can also help us do the change management strategy. And so this person is an athlete. They can jump on different parts of a transformation problem, right? So for me, I prefer to have athletes, right? I hire my technical experts when we need them, but I prefer athletes that can sort of, they're not the best at everything, but they can jump in a business case and come back out. They can say, okay, well, the change strategy we need to start thinking about looks like this. They can think about project management. They can think about stakeholder management. They are able to, they're personable enough in terms of their personality where they can work with anybody, regardless of how tough the other crowd is, right? And so I know that this person, I control them in any problem, and they'll figure out either if they can solve it or if they need somebody else to help them solve it, right? So this person is adaptable. They're athletes in a multi-sport athlete in every sense of the word. Ideally, that's what you're looking for. And so that comes true in the ability for that person to speak about problems and how they go from problems to solutions.
I like that metaphor, and that person you're describing, it's such a great description. I want to hire that person too. So Roderick, over to you.
All right. Because I work more within the social transformation change space, I think people I would be hiring, or I would recommend in terms of people who are seeking work within the change management space, you also have to be aware of what type of change you've navigated as an individual, right? So what are some of the changes, major changes that you've been a part of that process in, as opposed to just looking at it from a theoretical, like, I'm just going into work. Like, how open and adaptable to change are you as an individual, right? And if you think about your lived experience, what are some of those changes that you've had to navigate and swim within these uncharted waters, and to come out in the sense of having that plan and executing that plan, because a lot of change management is just plan execution and project management. And also, I think it's integral for people within this space to have people skills, because no matter what change is coming down the pipeline, you are still going to have to be able to communicate effectively with people, whether that be through an organizational lens or working with management, whatever the case may be. You are still going to have to be able to communicate well. And as a part of that communication strategies, it's message sent, message received, and message understood. Because once the message gets convoluted, then obviously it opens up the door for conflict and another bag of or another tin of worms that nobody really wants to get into, right? And I think it's also important for that individual to be multi-dimensional. And as Tosin, I think I might use that in the sense of just being that athlete, right? So yeah, you can be thrown into a fire and to help put out. Often change management, unfortunately, has been a reaction, right? So often a company will bring you in and say, yeah, we need to have some work done in this area because something has happened, right? And the way we look at it is also through an ounce of prevention. So you're trying to avoid or mitigate any type of adversity or any type of turmoil down the road by incorporating change management into your processes early at hand, right? So, being a well-rounded project manager and somebody who can pivot and navigate, I think it's essential. So when we're looking at people to bring onto our team, we look for not just your technical skills, but your ability to pivot and be able to navigate some of the unknown, right? And this, what would you do in a situation, for instance, or given a scenario? You know, that role play is often a big part of when we're bringing in new people. You know, how would you go about solving this, or helping to solve this, or empowering, you know, the team that you're going to be working to solve this?
Thank you. Shannon, what are you looking for?
So I'll start off by saying, so at the city, just because we're a bit of a smaller organization, you know, so my project managers, they don't often have sort of that subject matter expertise. Like if we're going into sort of development planning and doing a big transformation around the process there, it's more about the skill set that sort of I'm after. So being able to work with people is huge. Can you actually, you know, work with across the organization? Because that's often sort of what we're charged with. Facilitation, facilitating conversations, putting themselves in other people's shoes. So if you're doing like a transformation that's infecting the entire organization, there's going to be certain clients that are not going to be as comfortable. And so putting yourselves in other people's shoes and understanding that perspective and being able to pick up on that. Just understanding the pulse of the organization and which parts are tend to be a bit more innovative and which may not be, and the why around it. You know, as mentioned before, good project management skills, but being able to put a good plan together, understanding that every single initiative that you lead is not going to be the same. It's going to be different, and clients from that were on board for one initiative may be your biggest resistors for another one. And so being able to understand those nuances. So yeah, definitely being able to pivot, like was said earlier, is key.
Thank you. Aymen?
Sorry, I just unmuted myself. I think for me, I would say one of the skills or the sort of characteristics that would be useful is being comfortable with ambiguity. And the reason I say that is oftentimes you're going into these projects and you don't have the full lens. So you might not be a subject matter expert in whatever it is that they're implementing, but being comfortable with the ability to get there is really important. So I think most change people are ones that have developed the you know, the idea that this is normal. You're not going to have all the answers all the time, but you have the curious mindset. So you have a passion for learning. You have diplomacy skills, because truly you know, you're facing situations where sometimes it is a change that may be beneficial for one area of the business, but maybe not so great for another side. So how do you bridge the divide? I think also someone that has the capability to speak to different sides of the organization, so the business side as well as the technical side, and act as the conduit is really helpful. And having an open-minded perspective, because one of the ways that we work with our clients is really that we co-create solutions. And part of what's been the testament to our follow-on work is that we don't presuppose that there's only one way to, you know, get to your end goal. So having the flexibility in coming up with an approach, but also being equally open-minded to changing it, tweaking it, making sure that it resonates with clients' nuances is really important. And the other piece that I would just sort of plug is we're actually in the process of looking for a summer student for ShiftRight. And so, yeah, so I believe our posting is on the York Careers page, and happy to, you know, entertain any other questions if you have any. So yeah, it's definitely a great opportunity to get your feet wet and learn a little bit about what it is we do over the course of the summer.
Job post. Now, I'm going to teach all the students here something as we transition into the audience questions. A lot of times people ask me like, oh, the world is remote now. How do I network anymore? How do I stand out? How do I make connections? This is your opportunity. Do you think that if you connect on LinkedIn after this with the key people who you've met here today, and you asked a great question, and if you can come on video, if they recognize your face and they think that was a smart question, what do you think the odds are that they're going to actually take your invite and respond to that and maybe have a little networking session with you. It's dramatically up. Or if I were to make an introduction for you afterwards, and I'd say, remember the person who asked the great question about XYZ? And then, well, yeah, I remember that person. I'll chat with them. So this is your opportunity to stand up and like have a little networking action as well as asking a great question. It's something you're going to have to learn to do more and more in the Zoom world. Okay, I'm going to introduce people who have their questions. And I always say, I'm going to pronounce your name. If I mispronounce it, please correct me so that we all have it right. So I'm going to go first to Sharuk.
Thank you, Chris. So 3 things I picked up from the guests. One was somebody, well, Shannon mentioned flat organization, City of One, and then agile, and then thinking outside of the box. So I feel like organizations are still trying to incorporate change in the traditional pyramid structure, which has been around for more than a century. Today, we're living in a time where change is exponential, and more organizations are finding that bureaucracy is an impediment to change. Either top-heavy organizations are too slow to react or they don't react at all. Do you see more organizations changing the management structure itself? Layers of hierarchy served us well in the 20th century, but now maybe outdated. How do we organize our institutions that is empower people and reduce multiple layers in our organization so they are more flat and quick to react and be more agile?
See, so there's a good example. I'm remembering this gentleman for sure with that question. From the panel, if someone wants to give me a wave, does anyone want to take that one first from the group? Okay, Aymen.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Sharuk. And I would say, like, what I've seen in the organizations that we've been servicing is 2 trends. So one, which I spoke to earlier, is the move towards product owner-based structures. So this is really moving towards organizations that are organized around a product manager, an agile team, and that are constantly iterating. So you're coming up with solutions that you are creating together with the team, and it really requires decision-making capability to come down lower within the organization. So where this works is in industries that have a lot of change that are happening at an exponential rate. They're empowering their product managers who might be directors or managers within the existing org structure to make the decisions, but equally to make those decisions by gathering the insights across as well as upward within the organization. So I think the way that you think about this is that the hierarchy can't only be within the title. Your job might be expanding so that the accountability is flowing down while the hierarchy remains the same. The benefit, though, of that is you're developing the skill set that allows you then to move towards those leadership positions. So I'd say that's one way that I'm seeing it change, is just in the move towards this agile way of working, product management based organization of org structures that's really becoming a defining moment for some organizations, particularly as they're thinking about where we're moving as we go into the future. The second piece is what I call a hybrid. And with the hybrid model, what it looks like is the middle span of the organization is getting flatter. So essentially what's happening is you might not be organized in the same way as a product management structure, but that middle or part of the organization is getting.
Looks like we're having a little bit of a connection challenge there. So we might come back to Aymen for that. Anyone else on the panel want to jump in? We're good. We'll go to the next question. Okay, so we're going to go to the next question then, and we're going to go to Dahlia. And thank you for jumping up with your question.
Oh, thank you for listening to my question. One of the things I come from a medical background, and one of the biggest trends that we've been having lately is multidisciplinary work, or having people from multiple departments work together. In these multidisciplinary projects, we often face the problem that we have 2 cultures working in one project, and someone needs to act as a bridge, and often that's like the change management job. How do you do this? How do you act as like even working across countries or across departments, how do you work between two institutions working on the same in the same project if both have different cultures in order to make the work go smoothly?
Okay, so let's see if another member of the panel wants to jump on this one.
Yeah, I can maybe start.
Okay.
Yeah, I think all the panelists in answering that question around what do you look for said the same thing, maybe in different words around EQ, right? The emotional intelligence, cultural awareness, almost a sixth sense in picking up culture, that you're able to get into a room and observe. So for me, for example, if I have this change management specialist who's also the most vocal person in the room, that's really a yellow flag, because you really should be listening and taking in and observing as much as you are providing recommendations. So that's what I would say, that it's a difficult thing to do, but part of the reasons why you're at the table as a change person is that you're able to pick up on those differences. And you find that the people that are in the room don't realize that those differences are there from a cultural standpoint. They just seem to think that that other person doesn't get it while I get it, right? And so as a person who's in the room, whether you're the change person or not, if you have this sense of picking up on, okay, well, this person is saying the same thing, they just mean it, you just coming at it from a different angle, you have to jump in and help translate, right? That job becomes really important. Aymen talked about, organizations going from, I work in an organization with 80,000 people. We can't all make decisions about where we go forward, but I'm a part of a program right now where there's 30 people, and I'm a integrator on that program. Everybody reports into the program, but I'm not their manager. They all come with different parts of the organization. I'm going to be able to pick up on people's cues, even in a virtual environment, and figure out where I need to step in and help translate, right? And so that role doesn't have to be a formal role, but people that have that skill set, you always find them in these type of programs. And as soon as I recognize them, I actually call them aside and say, hey, I saw that you were able to bring these 3 people together. Could you continue to play that role? Because I find a lot of times they're lost in translation, right? So in addition to the work you're doing, you now become a translator, and you had value that if it wasn't there before, the program could sort of go in a different direction or not be as successful as it is. So I think it's a role that anybody can play, but the change person in the room, I always have to have that sense that I need to pick up cues around culture and around personality differences that could be resulting in conflict or tension on the project, not based on the decisions we need to make, but based on those differences alone. I hope that helps.
If I could just dovetail on that and just to add a couple words in there. So you want to think about common denominators, right? What are the denominators that people at the table have? Often we see our differences, but we don't see the commonalities that will help us come together in terms of formulating a process that everybody has, that interest on, right? And as my colleague also was saying, just being able to interpret, right? Sometimes it may not be clear, but as a liaison in terms of just being a part of the process of change, one of your jobs is to interpret, again, some of those common denominators that may not be clear, but you've got to find them and bring them to the table and be able to, as he was saying, translate or interpret, what we do have in common and how we can move forward based on what's in front of us.
Okay, thank you. And I want to also say, Dalia, great job, great question. I appreciate that. Thanks for jumping in. Okay, next up, we're going to go to Antoinette.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for insights. Really interesting conversation. I will admit I work in change for the province, so I'm asking this question as a current change leader, and I'm sure there'll be aspiring ones as well who have the same. We all get to where we are via very different routes, and I can appreciate that everyone here is going to have a different perspective here. But what, if any, formal designations or professional courses specific to change can you recommend personally?
Shannon, would you like to take that
Yeah,
one?
sure, I can start. I actually started my very first change management book was actually it was called Leading Change from John Carter. It was a fantastic intro book into change management. I highly recommend reading it. But when you think about more sort of really taking change management to that practical level, I mean, yes, like as I mentioned, there's like dozens of different change management methodologies. Which one do you choose? What do you do? I took sort of ProSize ADCAR change management kind of certification, went through the program. I love it. It's one of the sort of methodologies that we're implementing at the City of Vaughan. And it gives you real practical tools. So that's what I like it. There's also the CCMP, which is gaining a lot of credit, worldwide recognized, something to look in as well as part of that.
Thank you. And you said Dave Carter, the book?
Sorry, John Carter.
John Carter.
John Cotter, sorry, it's Kotter. Yeah.
Thank you.
And needless to say that Schulich has an amazing change management certification process available to York University students. So I would always plug that, being a York grad myself.
Thank you, Roderick.
Your check's in the mail is what that's.
Absolutely.
So as a person who doesn't have a formal change certificate or designation, but to Shannon's point, I would say the way that I've approached it, and I encourage people that sort of reach out to me and ask the question, should I do it? I always say yes, especially if you're starting from a point where you haven't been exposed first. But I also have to say, once you do your designation, the journey doesn't you don't become a master change specialist right there and then. I have to say that I remember when I was trying to make this transition, I probably read 15 books on change management and became familiar with all of these frameworks and started to use them on projects. So I wasn't a change manager when I started using change management frameworks on my projects, right? As soon as I was given an initiative, and at that point, I'd already had my aha moment about change management. It was just a matter of, okay, I need to implement this. And I'm always a big advocate of starting where you are, right? If you're in a team and you're not the change specialist, but you're involved in projects, put your hand up to be the change person and then go and get help to try and figure out how to do it. No one's going to expect the world from you. You're not the change specialist. The openness from your organization should be a little bit more lenient compared to when you get your designation, right? So you can afford to be able to implement some practice and get that under your belt. And so if I'm trying to hire somebody, those are the questions I'm going to be asking. What projects have you led that you've had to implement any type of framework, right? And not necessarily what designation do you have, okay? So it makes it easier though to pick you out in a group if there was some training on change management in the resume. So I hope the dichotomy sort of makes sense for folks, that there is a balance of, even if you haven't done it, you should still have an opportunity to lead projects in school, in your church, mosque, or temple, or in your own business or somewhere else where you've used change management frameworks.
Thank you very much.
Aymen, would you like to jump in on this one?
Sure. Just let me know if you can you hear me okay, Chris?
You're back. You're good. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think I would just echo Tosin's points. I did do the certification. I did my master's in organizational behavior with a specialization in change. I think it's all great, but I think ultimately the proof is in the pudding. You kind of really have to use those frameworks in a practical setting to really get that experience. So I would say a balance of both. So definitely, having had the experience leading something, having gone through a project or something where you've had to shift your way of doing something, it definitely is very compelling because it can show that you know how to navigate that effectively. So equally, I would say the certifications are great, but I would definitely say the experience backing it is what will make it more solid for sure.
Thank you. Makes sense, right? You got to deliver at the end of the day. Yeah.
Antoinette, great question. Thank you very much. And out of curiosity, are you a York alumna?
I am. I just graduated from the Master of Public Policy Admin and Law last year.
Awesome. Congratulations. That's really great. Thanks for coming back and hanging out with us. We appreciate it. Okay, next we'll go to Lisa.
Hello, thank you for your time and thank you for this opportunity to ask you questions. My question is regarding how does the hiring process at the City of Vaughan look and what are the time frames, if you can specify. And the second question, it would be probably addressed to Shannon, as Shannon mentioned regarding lean implementation. So my question is, which processes are targeted for lean application? Is it procurement, accounting, or something else? Thank you.
Sure. So just to go to the first question, so it's as any government organization, posting will go up. There's 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks application period, and then it goes through its normal HR processes. Some positions take way longer than others. It really depends on kind of which position it is. But happy to, if you ever wanted to connect on that, happy to take it offline and chat further. So the second piece around our lean stuff. So lean, we've sort of over the past few years started the journey around lean. I think it's been about 1.5 years, 2 years, where we started with some basic training for our leaders around lean and what it was and why it was important. It was all part of our journey around innovation. Most recently, we have now, as part of our employee onboarding process, we've embedded lean training as mandatory training. So you're an employee at the City of Vaughan, you've just started, you've got 6 months. There's a number of courses we take employees through. Lean training is one of them. And now we're continuing that journey. We've trained some green belts. We're continuing to train others in the yellow belt. And it's really to build a culture of innovation right from the leaders to staff level, so that we continue. So we talk the same language and we look for opportunities, whether it's small processes or big transformations. In terms of sort of transformational initiatives where we apply sort of the lean work, we kind of use it in tandem depending on sort of what we're working on. So it could be project change, lean, but the development applications approvals process, that's a really big example. There were major changes made to legislation that tightened municipal timelines around development applications. And so we're looking at increasing our processes, doing better on our processes, but also going digital. So that's been one of them, counter services and going through an omni approach so that there's one counter and not 20 at City Hall. That's another initiative we're working on. So there's like about, I would say 10 major transformational projects that we're currently involved in.
Super, thanks for the answer. And thanks, Lisa, for the question. Next up, we have Nazira.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my question. My question is, for someone like myself who just completed a sociology degree and is going to finish my honors portion of it by this summer, and I come with work experience in terms of having my own self-employment and leading a team along with other various employment, how would you suggest possibly transitioning into a change organization? I know another person asked designations that would be helpful, but would there be any sort of limitations in terms of someone with a varying background, or I guess just any suggestions would be helpful.
Okay, who would like to take a crack at that one?
I mean, I can take a crack at it. I also have a sociology degree. And I think it's looking for opportunities. Like you may not find the ultimate change management job per se, but I think especially right now, being, an entrepreneur myself, but having that, I guess, that perspective of looking for opportunity, or not just actually looking for it, but creating opportunity is something that you may want to consider. Right? Because, change management still is relatively new in the scope of just the processes of corporate and nonprofit organizations, right? So I think there's that opportunity to create these opportunities that have never been, put out in front of us traditionally, right? And what you can enhance, like for instance, when we started, it was what we could do for you. Here's how we could help you in this process of change. And often they may not even have considered, changing how they were doing things, but it was just, bringing an idea that was going to prompt change. Obviously, when it comes down to anything where there is customers or whatnot, and if you can help change their trajectory when it comes down to increasing their sales or whatnot, there often will be ears listening, right? So I think, looking for opportunities now and creating these opportunities is something that we want to do now, especially now.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks to both of you. Next, we're going to go to Ramjoo.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. This is just a bundle of newness and knowledge for us. Thank you, York, for initiating this as well. So it emerges a question in me, like I am an undergrad student and quite new here, not been exposed to the industry of Canada much, but have an experience back home in business management or so. So just a question, what is the recommendation from the panel? What should I do? Having knowledge in fields like this, but not experience, do I need to have experience prior in PMP or CMA or something like that? Or should I just jump into change management and start reading books as you all recommended or having the designations? Thank you for taking the question.
Tosin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't have, so first question, there isn't a lot of entry-level change management jobs. Let's put it that way, right? It'll be rare for you to find that. So one of the ways that I would recommend you go about doing your research, and I know I'm answering your question in a roundabout way, is once you identify change leaders and people that are doing change management right now, one of the things I do whenever I'm doing career research is I actually go on LinkedIn and look at what they did prior to getting to this point, right? I bet you if you can go find 50 people who lead change, or I have change manager, change director, senior manager, if you find 50 of them, you're starting to find commonalities as to where they all started from, right? You'll find the segment of people that started with project management. You'll find a segment of people that start with business analysis or business analyst type jobs. You'll find a segment of people who just were in a role that was in a technical area and then somehow made a switch and was able to add change management to it, right? So you'll find there are different paths to get there. But if somebody knows from undergrad that change management is what they do, I always encourage them to try and go into areas of business that have to do with people strategy, recruitment, HR, human capital, right? If you know for sure this is what you want to do, those are the areas where you sort of start from. Organizational behavior, those are the type of roles that I think you can sort of start with, and you can get yourself into the system. If you're looking at an environment like banking or telecoms, for example, project management, business analyst type roles are also always a good place to sort of get started. In addition to, again, human resources type role. I didn't say recruiter, but human resources type role, right? So that's what I would suggest. But like to wrap it up, like I said, it's rare that you'll find an entry-level change role, especially in an organization like, say, a bank. You might find that in a consulting firm, for example, but not in a bank, not in industry, but more consulting. I hope that helps.
So that's a perfect transition to where I wanted to jump next, which is I want to ask Aymen, would you view it the same way as a consulting organization? Would you take someone who has, capacity, skill set, school training, and train them up, or would they need to come to you already with years of experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. And I think it's timely because part of what we've done is we are trying to create sort of the summer student program as an opportunity for us to learn about the candidate and for the candidate to kind of get their feet wet and start to see the type of work we do. So it's a mutual opportunity for both sides to see, is this even the kind of work that would be interesting to them? Do they like the types of things that they're getting exposed to? On the other end of it, because we're a startup consulting firm, the benefit is you're kind of getting exposure to some of our largest projects very early on. And you're also getting direct interaction with myself as well as the other principals on the team. So you're learning really from people that have gone through it. To address Ragbi's second question, one of the first people we hired was actually not educated in Canada. So I did my master's in the UK. So did she, but she came from another country where she was working at the KPMG practice in Asia. And she was just a great fit. So I would say I would not limit geography as a barrier to entry, particularly as we've been in this remote world for so long. I'm seeing a lot of that change, especially nationally, where organizations are sourcing consulting firms that may not be physically located in the same province. So what I would say is, certainly check out the types of organizations that you're interested in working with. If you're open to a startup consulting firm or a smaller organization, the benefit, like I said, is you're going to get a lot of the tactical training and exposure to those kinds of projects early on that will give you a kind of understanding of what could this role look like. So that's it. That's one piece. And then the other piece I would also add to that is, if you're in a university program that has an opportunity for an internship or a co-op placement, do your research, right? Figure out what types of organizations do you want to work with, what industry, and kind of create that opportunity for yourself if you can, right? Do they have a summer program? Do they have a co-op program? Is there someone that you can talk to? Because oftentimes, for me, when I was a student, that kind of real world experience was super helpful for helping me to figure out my next career move.
Love it. That is a bang on point in terms of if you can get yourself into one of those courses or into one of those programs, make it happen. It is valued by employers. It is valued by the consultancies. And even think about it like creatively as well. I'm going to come at this from the startup perspective, which is that there's a host of startups that are looking for people to work with them on like small contracts or projects or that type of thing. And you have any opportunity, you can build up that experience. As some of the panelists said, to show that you can do it and you have some experience is really important early on to get that first break. Next, we're going to go to Rashmi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for delivering an excellent panel today. It's been great. Thanks, Chris, for moderating as well. So I'm currently an MBA student at Schulich, and I'm finishing up my degree in 5 weeks, 6 weeks actually. And I'm in this information gathering stage of the career search. And I'm really interested in learning about change management. It's actually been something that's been on my mind since I started my MBA. So my question for the panel today is, since you are all in this space, what are some resources that you turn to? So I know we spoke a little bit about ProSci, but are there certain blogs you follow, people on social media, thought leaders, conferences, other resources, podcasts? I'd love to hear from the panel.
I can start, Chris.
Yes.
So just when you were asking the question, I thought of one. So the Association of Change Management Professionals, and this is just a generic comment to anyone that's interested, they have a LinkedIn group. Prior to COVID, they also had, I want to say maybe less frequently than monthly, but they had some sort of get together. What's great about that is, particularly if you're in the space where you want to learn more about it or you just have questions, the types of individuals that come to these events generally are people that are practitioners or in the change space in some capacity. So what it does, it gives you the opportunity to network with them, to ask these types of questions. And then in terms of just thought content that I have found useful, so I'm biased to my alma mater. So I went to a school in the UK. They have a great blog that I follow. Harvard Business Review is another one that I also tend to follow. I think any place where you're getting information that you find is topical and useful, particularly within what's happening now. So, return to work pieces, diversity and inclusion, big data, AI. Like I would say, start by focusing on what is topical and pressing to most organizations at the moment. And then you can kind of narrow that down to say, in the industries that you're focusing on or the ones that you're interested in, you can start to be more selective. So depending on what that is, I would focus there. So that's one piece. And then the other piece that I would say is, in addition to the association, sorry, I got that little, I'm not sure if you guys can still hear me.
You're good.
In addition to the Association of Change Management Professionals, if you do a LinkedIn search, there's a whole bunch of change organization groups that you can, again, it will give you the opportunity to connect in and see who's on the roster and, start reaching out to them or following the types of things that they're posting.
Super. Roderick, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, sure. I would definitely recommend LinkedIn as a place where as soon as you put in change management, you'll see an array of people. And I've met so many people and actually got several contracts off of LinkedIn just based on change management being a part of my profile. Also, if you're familiar with McKinsey Group, it's a strategy / change management organization that does very high level change management within the corporate structure globally. And I've had the honor of working with them and getting some mentorship from them in some regard also. So I think if you reach out to different organizations like McKinsey or different professionals that you'll find on LinkedIn, you'll be able to just have the conversation and learn a lot in terms of, either be from a consultancy perspective or just from a organizational change management process and how it takes place.
Super. Now, I've got one last question from the chat that I'm going to specifically throw to Tosin, and then we're going to do something special. So don't you dare leave before 4 o'clock, anybody. Okay. So Tosin, the question I want to ask you here that was in the chat was talking about paths. This is from Hassan. Not many companies have COOs with change management happening so rapidly. Could we see an executive position as the Chief Change Management Officer? I see you as one of those guys if that gets created, and that's why I'm asking the question.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's actually already happening. So you may yes, the role exists, right? And you'll see chief transformation officers now. You'll see. I like to dissect those roles and sort of see what the person's responsible for. And so I'll call out a few where I've seen change management be prominent in that person's mandate. So chief transformation officer, the chief information officer. So from a technology and data standpoint, they have a component of change management usually embedded in their role now, if you read these descriptions. And then classically, the chief operating officer has always been sort of that person that would be the go-to to help steer change in most organizations. But more and more, the concept of a transformation management office and a chief transformation officer is gaining some ground. And I've seen that in a few companies. And that person just primarily responsible for changing the organization.
Awesome. Okay, now here's the fun part. Like I said, don't anybody leave. And the thing is that Serena, and Lindsay don't even know this is about to happen. So in the Schulich startup community and in my classroom, we have a tradition, which is that when people come out and donate their time and spend it with us, then we don't want to make that a one-way thing. They've given us so much energy and insight. So what we do in return is we crowdsource the thank you when it's over. As opposed to me making a speech, we crowdsource the thank you. So we are going to go to rapid 30-second thank yous from people that were here today. What did you learn? And what do you want to say as a thank you to the group for them giving you their time and their energy? And I have a member of Schulich from the student body who knows this tradition. So I'm going to go to Denitsa first, and she's going to kick us off and show us how it's done.
Thank you, Chris. Well, it's a lot of pressure. So my name is Denitsa. I was listening to everything, and I guess one of these people who tries to observe before I say something. So thank you very much for opening our minds to think not just in the direct sense, but actually look at different perspectives of change management. One thing that I would take away from this is actually that I'll have to think long and hard. Is it change management first in policy? Is it change management first in technology? Is it change management first in procedures, organizational? There's so many aspects and becomes very complex, and actually how it is carried through, and government versus private sector, profitability versus sustainability. I mean, it blew my mind how the world is changing at a very fast pace, and change management has so many diverse areas. So thank you. It was very informative.
Awesome job. You lived up to the pressure. Okay, now what happens next is people put their hands up, or I call the next 4 or 5 people out and they get to share their thoughts. And so we're going to go to Sharuk next.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I just wanted to thank everyone, all the guests, really informative, really appreciate your time. And one thing that Tosin mentioned, he mentioned something that was really interesting. A lot of times, change manager is sort of like a catalyst for change. So, the solution, oftentimes you don't recommend a concrete step, but you're sort of like the facilitator that, makes the magic happen, and you're the catalyst that, other teams bring forth the ideas from. So that was really interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great job. Ragvi, you're up next.
I just really want to say thank you to opening our horizons in a way. I really didn't know about it, the change management. It looks interesting, but I didn't know it is interesting. So thank you so much. My notes are full, and I'm going to do a lot of research today. And thank you for initiating it. It was a great panel. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Dalia, you're up next.
I just wanted to thank you so much for being here today and talking about this. Change management has always been something I've seen job like requests and applications, but I've never understood really what it means. I really appreciate you clarifying it's really people-centered, and I really appreciate the T-shaped metaphor on the experience I need in order to be able to work in change management. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Lisa, I'm coming to you.
Thank you so much. It's a great opportunity for me to get to know more and to meet you all, guys. Thank you for precious advices and tips, and definitely come back to you after the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Look, we got 2 minutes left. We're coming down to the wire. Rashmi, you're in.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you for your time. 2 hours is not a joke, so I definitely appreciate that and your insights as well. A few things that stood up to me is that the emphasis on stakeholder perspectives. That was really interesting. I think, Eamonn, you were saying being comfortable with ambiguity. I think that's totally up exactly what change management is in like a few words. And it's interesting. It's I think someone else said it was very interesting to learn how multidimensional it is, and it truly is. There's so many layers to it. So it's definitely confirmed my interest in change management, and it's a good starting off point for me, and I'm looking forward to learning more. So thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Well done. And Lindsay and Serena, I turn it back to you with a bow to close off the last 60 seconds.
Great. Lindsay, did you want to say anything?
I do just want to say thank you so much to everyone for participating, especially to our panel and to Chris for facilitating such great conversations. And hopefully you see through our great panelist perspective, the importance of change management first and foremost, and how integral it's going to be as you're considering careers for the future. So I'll flip it over to you, Serena.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again, like, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. Our intention today was to help you discover careers in change management. And oh my God, we got so much more than that. I've learned so much, and I hope that, you know, you guys are able to take so much away from this. And just thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to our moderator, Chris, for helping, you know, really tie everything together. You did a fantastic job. So with that said, I hope everyone stays safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.